Hey guys, this is Jackie from Jack Gets Lost on a Book Hole, and it is time for me to talk about my 8th favorite ship. And this one is actually a book one, unlike the last one, which was a TV show one. And that is Rhett and Scarlet from Gone with the Wind. This is my first ever copy of the book. And I have this copy as well. This was my mom's original copy given to her by my grandmother. This is a 1974. It's like 1974 copy of Gone with the Wind. And then I actually also have the sequel. There was a sequel written not by Margaret Mitchell, but by this one, Alexander Ripley. Which this one actually has, if you are familiar with, whether you read the book or you've just seen the movie, you know that the original Gone with the Wind does not end on a happy note. It kind of ends on a very bitter note. But this one actually this one actually ends happy. So this couple, Scarlet and Rhett, I was thinking about this last night and what I would say about how much I love this couple. And I've come to a conclusion that this is a really problematic couple. And I mean, I've never watched any reviews or seen any discussions on any internet sites, like on Goodreads or anything, or watched any reviews on Gone with the Wind. But I was thinking about it, and I realized that this couple, like I said, they're really problematic. They got a lot of issues. Rhett and Scarlet have a very complex, complicated relationship, and that's putting it nicely. So, if you are unfamiliar with Gone with the Wind, this is a story that takes place during the Civil War time of the South, in Georgia to be more specific. It centers around Scarlet O'Hara, and she is the spoiled, selfish little brat, who flirts with all these guys all the time, and she's totally hung up on this one guy, Ashley Wilkes. But she is constantly being told by her father and everyone else that her and Ashley can't be together because they're not from the same ilk. They would never work. And he is engaged to his distant cousin, Melanie. And I guess that was normal back then to marry distant cousins. I mean, that's how in Downton Abbey, I remember the oldest daughter, Mary, she had to marry her distant cousin so that they could keep their family home. So I guess that was normal back then, you know. And so, meanwhile, there's another guy that is, like, in love with Scarlet, and that is Rhett Butler, who is the southern gentleman scoundrel, also rich, but she does not like him. At least in the beginning, she can't stand him. But of course, that won't stop him from pursuing her. And like I said, this is during the Civil War time. And, so all the men, except for Rhett doesn't go to, I can't remember why Rhett didn't go to the battlefield right away, because he does eventually joins the war, but he doesn't at first. He stays, in the city. But, and, while she's mourning the loss of Ashley, she marries Melanie's brother Charles. And so making her and Melanie Wilkes sister-in-laws, which really annoys Scarlet. And they end up living together, and it's about them living, being roomies and everything. And then they're constantly waiting for news about the war front, and Scarlet is constantly rebelling against society's rules, and there's this whole, like, Rhett and her, this little dance they have going on between the two of them, and it's about all the different ways that Scarlet tries to, like, make do with her situation, and trying to deal with the fact that Ashley's married to someone else, and that if he and Scarlet got together, he would be essentially cheating on Melanie, and like also avoiding the advances of Rhett. So that's not, as I've said multiple times before, I'm just really bad at giving summaries. Like I said, Rhett and Scarlet have a very complicated relationship. Because first of all, they are the two. She is a selfish, spoiled brat, and she can be kind of a bitch. And then you have Rhett, who's this scoundrel. He's a gambler. He's too charming for his own good. I personally think, and I think he's a bit of a sucker because he was trying so hard to win over Scarlet, and he just couldn't do it. In fact, I was also thinking last night how this couple reminds me of the current couple I'm reading about in the book Roses by Leah Meacham. I don't know how to say her name, but they kind of have a similar storyline. I mean, there's no Civil War going on because it's like the war that is happening for them is World War I, but that doesn't become like the Civil War becomes a major plot point in the book in Gone with the Wind. But in Roses, the whole world, it's World War I that's in the story, but it's not like a major plot point. In fact, like the guys, they kind of gloss over World War I stuff. Like the three guys go to the war. I mean, they don't entirely gloss over it because there are consequences to the war, but it's not like it doesn't play a major part of the story. Like you only get like a chapter or two where the author mentions that the three main guys in the story go to war, and then the next chapter, the families are waiting for them to come home. But the love story is very similar. And it's also, both stories are in the South, except for in Roses, it's in Texas. And I don't know if they consider themselves, I mean, I guess they do, but I feel like it's a different kind of South in Texas. But I mean, I've never been there, so I don't know how accurate my thoughts are on Texas, but like, it's the characters like Scarlet and Mary Toviler are very similar. They're, like I said, they're both in the South. They both women are very fiercely independent, very stubborn, like very spoiled brats, daddy's girl type females. And then the two guys, Percy Warwick and Rhett Butler, are very similar, except for Rhett, I think, is more of a scoundrel than Percy is, but they're rich men that want to take care of the women they love. They're very passionate and aggressive and very romantic at times, but also very controlling a little bit and possessive. So there are similar storylines, especially with the characters' personalities. And in both cases, both guys are like hung up on the girl, the main female protagonist. They're like obsessed with them and hung up on them. But the girl is constantly resisting them and is telling them, no, it's not going to work between us. You're not going to ever be, I'm never going to meet your expectations. And she keeps pushing him away, but in both stories, the guys are really stubborn. And keeps thinking he can convince her and change her mind and everything. But in both cases, it doesn't really work. And I think in both cases, the stories end badly. But, like I said, there's a sequel about Gone with the Wind, where it ends happy. So, despite the fact that they are problematic, their story is so beautiful in such a tragic and dramatic way. I mean, how he's so passionate, how Rhett is so passionate and determined to win over Scarlet, despite the fact that he knows that she's in love with Ashley. He won't give up on her. He keeps fighting for her and keeps trying to win her over, but it's not until the very end that he finally gives up and realizes it's too late. It's never going to happen. I have to just give up now. And you can see her starting to fall for him. She's in denial and is trying so hard to resist him, but there are a lot of moments, like there's when they have their first kiss, he kisses her so passionately, and you can tell she's into it. She won't she's kind of struggling and fighting it, but at the same time, you can tell she's really into it. She likes being kissed like that. And then I don't remember why, but there was a scene where Rhett finally snapped and was like, okay, this time you're going to be with me tonight. You're not going to be thinking about your precious Ashley. And he grabs her and carries her up to the bedroom. And she clearly enjoys that too. And like the next morning, she's really happy, content, and really satisfied. It's like if she were a dog, her tail would be wagging. Unfortunately, though, that's at the point when Rhett is slowly starting to realize that he's. I mean, even after that, he keeps trying. Like when they have a daughter, they end up having a daughter at one point because they do. Spoiler alert: they do get married. And they have a daughter, and he's thinking that the daughter will bring them together, and it kind of does. I mean, they both have this love and devotion for their daughter and everything, but then things get worse because, spoiler, the girl falls off her horse and dies, which is really sad and heartbreaking for both of them. Like, because, Rhett really loved his daughter, and she was like daddy's little girl, and I think. And so did Scarlet. She really loved this little girl, and then the little girl sadly dies. And I feel like, if I remember, as I was reading it, I was thinking how Rhett kind of blamed Scarlet for the little girl's death, and he was like, you never really loved her. And she's like, of course I did. She was not just your daughter, she was mine too. And they fight about that, and that's when everything finally falls apart between the two of them. I think he finally gives up after their daughter dies, which is so heartbreaking. Now, like I said, there are problematic elements about this couple. I feel like you could almost argue that Rhett is a little bit, like I said, he's a bit controlling and possessive, which it's ironic that I love this couple, and in most cases I don't like controlling and possessive men. And I think Rhett kind of crosses that line a little bit. Like, he treads that line between being possessive and controlling. But, like I said, it's such an epic story, and there's so much more than just their relationship. It's about Scarlet herself, and finding out who she is as a person. But like I said, he's abusive. I think he can be, abusive. No, he doesn't hit her, but he has the capability, because he does snap a couple times, and I think he pushes her down the stairs in anger. So he is capable of finally, of snapping in her, but I think he would never really purposely hurt her. I think he'd still, even by the end of the story, when he's all like, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, I think he still does care about her and love her and everything, and he's still kind of hung up on her. I don't think he's completely moved on, because, especially if you read the sequel, The Scarlet, there are a lot of moments where you can tell he hasn't entirely given up on her. Like, he still, or at least he still holds a torch for her. He can't entirely let her go, and at one point, I think that's why she ends up leaving, because she actually goes to Ireland to see her Irish relatives, because, she's Irish, so she goes to visit her relatives in Ireland, and I think he's thinking, okay, now she's gone, so I can move on and get over her. But you realize when he goes to Ireland himself, I don't think he has entirely gotten over her, even though we only see from Scarlet's perspective. Which in most cases, normally I have a problem with that, because even if it's not in first person, it's still in first person perspective, where we only see things from the one character's point of view. Even though, and yes, it's not first person, but it's the perspective of that person, of the protagonist. We only get their point of view. That's one of the things I love about multi-perspective. Like with Song of Ice and Fire series, we get multiple characters' point of views. And no, it's not, I'm not saying it's first person. But, let's see, what else? Also, so, Scarlet, while Rhett has his issues, Scarlet also has her, like I said, she's a spoiled brat, she's selfish, she like flirts with men all the time, and she totally dangles Rhett with the, she's got him wrapped around her little finger without without meaning to, because he is totally, as she's hung up on Ashley, he's hung up on her. And like I said, I feel like even when he's all like, I don't care, he starts to not care anymore, I think he still cares. He just is trying not to. And like I said, in the sequel, I think he does clearly still care. He just doesn't want to admit it. So it's a very problematic couple. And like I said, there are times when, she's horrible to him, and she kind of provokes him. I feel, not that it's her fault. I'm not saying it's her fault. His behavior towards her is uncalled for, but of course some people might disagree and think it is her fault, because just the way she acts. Now, of course, if you don't, again, I'm not saying it's entirely her, but yeah, she totally takes him for granted, his love for her. And like I said, he is capable of snapping. I mean, as I was saying before, he pushed her down the stairs in anger, and he even admitted, I think, when she is caught in a compromising position with Ashley, even though at that point she's starting to realize that she doesn't love Ashley anymore, and her relationship with him is more like they're really good friends. I mean, she doesn't entirely let him go, but she's starting to realize that they're just good friends. Unfortunately, to everybody else, because she's caught in this position where, in the setting of the story, too, if you're caught in a position where you're hugging a man and being affectionate towards a man, and not necessarily and not even that you're grabbing his ass or kissing him on the lips or anything, or just touching him inappropriately, but just hugging him, it comes off to the characters as inappropriate. And Rhett finds out, which she's hoping in the book that he doesn't, but he does find out, of course. And I think this scene, and I'm saying scene because I'm thinking about the movie too. She's sitting at her table, and then he's like grabbing her face from behind, is like, I could just easily snap your neck and break it. Because he's a strong man. He's stronger than her because he's a man, because men technically are biologically stronger than women. That's just scientific fact that men technically, but women are capable of being just as strong as men, I think. But scientifically speaking, men are physically stronger than women. So he's talking about how, and plus, of course, back then it was even more so because women weren't seen as able to do a lot of stuff. They, a lot of physical stuff. Like, they couldn't play sports or anything like that. And he's threatening her. He's saying, I could snap your neck in half and squeeze your head like a melon. I mean, he doesn't say like a melon, but basically that's what he's implying. But he's like, I'm not gonna do it. This actually, because I think this actually is the same scene when he, like, sweeps her up in her arms and is like, you're gonna be with me tonight. And he forces her to have sex. But see, despite the fact that they have problematic elements, I find the story so fascinating, their romance so interesting. I mean, like I said, I'm the first one to admit that they are a really screwed up couple, but then at the same time, the fact that they're screwed up is why I like them so much. And I think a lot of people are like that. A lot of people like flawed couples, because after a while, it gets boring when the couple is perfect and not that flawed. And just, I like cute and fluffy, but at the same time, I like a really screwed up couple as well. But that's also, it can't, but at the same time, I will not read a book that's just about the couple. Like I said, I don't read romance unless there's more to it than just the romance. And, the romance is a prominent feature in the story, and the same with the other book, Roses, but it's not just about the romance, and plus it's written so beautifully. I have a very complicated relationship. Like, it's hard for me to explain how particular I am about romance novels. Like, I won't read, like, put it this, the best way I can explain it is I won't read the ones that you can buy, like, at Walmart or the airport. Like those Harlequin romances, or, or like the ones with the cover with the guy with no shirt and he happens to have a six-pack and everything and the girl's all over him and stuff. I mean, there's one book that was close to that was a romance that I read, and that's because my friend was trying to get me so hard to get me to read this book, and she said I would really like the male lead. So, and that was Fool's Paradise. I don't remember who the author was, but I enjoyed it. I mean, it was very entertaining. I liked it, but I ended up giving it away. I don't know wherever it is, but I ended up donating it. Not to the used bookstore I've been donating books to, because this was before I moved. This was like a few years ago, actually. Probably when we were thinking about moving, but we hadn't gone through the whole process of moving yet. But anyway, their complex relationship is what I love, and I'm glad, and I actually I appreciate and I like the ending is it's a good ending. It's very unique, but at the same time, I kind of want them to have a happy ending. I was kind of rooting for them for it to work out. And that's why I'm glad that I found out there was a sequel written about them and their relationship and how it ends, and it does end happy. And I think Scarlet does start to learn that it can't be just about her. She has to still continue fighting for what she wants, but she also can't be a selfish brat. The whole world does not revolve around her and her desires. And she can't, and when she loses Rhett, I think, and realizes that she's in love with him and everything, that she does love him, she realizes by the end of that, has to not only fight for what she wants, but she has to prove that she deserves him. Because throughout this whole book, she never deserved the guy. I mean, yes, there's, points that you can make about how screwed up he is, and how bad of a character he is. Not a badly written character, but just as a human being, he's not a saint. But the thing is, he admits that, throughout the whole book, he admits that he's a scoundrel, and that he's a horrible, and he admits that he's a bad guy. But he and Scarlet are so perfect together, because they're so beautifully screwed up, that they make a perfect match. But even she pushes him away by the end of it. And like I said, I think she starts to learn by the end of the story when she loses him, is when she realizes and learns that she has to earn his love. She has to work a lot harder to prove to him that she is worthy. Now, in the beginning of Scarlet, it seems like she hasn't entirely learned her lesson. But I think by the end of it, she does learn and realize, especially because something happens to her in the book, that forces her to realize, to realize the error of her ways and to realize and learn her lesson in a very harsh way, but she probably needed that, that slap in the face, that dose of cold water, so to speak. Which, by the way, I recommend, if you're content with, if you're content with the ending and you feel like a sequel will ruin it, then you don't have to read it, but I would recommend checking out Scarlet if you haven't. I think it's really good. I think it still has that same beautiful writing style, even if it's not written by Margaret Mitchell, and I think it flows nicely with the original Gone with the Wind. And you also get to see Ireland. You get to visit Ireland, which is really cool. But, some people, but if you don't want to read it, because you're worried it will ruin it, and plus, yes, I love it, but you might come to find out that you don't love it. Because this is just my opinion. I think it's good, and maybe I'm wrong about Scarlet, and maybe, it doesn't flow nicely, and maybe you think it doesn't flow nicely, and it just ruins the uniqueness of the original ending. And of course, sequels that were written years later, just like sequels for movies that are filmed years later, that come out years later, they're never as good as the original. Although there is one occasion, despite what that site, Mojo's Top 10 says, I think Simba's Pride is one of the best Disney sequels. But I guess not everybody feels that way. But anyway. But yeah, so, but I love about Scarlet and Rhett is they're complicated. They're not perfect. And they're not fluffy, they're not a fluffy couple. They're not all sugar coated. They're complicated. They're screwed up. They're both horrible people. But you just fall in love with their romance and with their passion and romance and, with their passionate filled relationship. Despite how flawed it is. And it's not about I don't think Margaret Mitchell intended for it to be perfect. I think she intended to just write a story about a real couple during the Civil War in the South. I think that's what she wanted. She did not want to write a sugary couple of today's standards. And because this was a very dramatic time in our history. Especially for the South because, they lost the war. So it was a pretty tough time for them. And I think that's what she wanted to write, this couple during this time when it was really hard for America and especially for the South. I think that's what she wanted. She didn't want a perfect, sugary couple, and, a romanticized couple, I think. No, she did romanticize it, but still, so that is my I think it's number 8 ship that I want to talk about. So I'll have to do a couple more in the next few days if I want to get a lot of them, a lot of ships, talk about a lot of ships. But surprisingly, it's hard because I want to talk about book-related ships, but I'm constantly my instinct is to constantly talk about screen ships on TV and on movies, and it's just I'm trying not to do that because this is technically a book related YouTube account. I guess I could talk about I don't know much. I don't know much about. I would say I could talk about some comic book couples, but again, I'm going by TV here. So I'm gonna try to get a few more couples that are book related instead of TV related, or they were book related first. If you guys liked this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Alright. Bye.